So today I want to talk about my favourite book of all time now, of my 23 years of life, of being a reader. There's just one book that I read when I was 16 and it's always been my favourite, and since then nothing has topped it as of yet, and that book is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And essentially I just want to tell you about it. This video is basically my pitch for you to also read this book, and I'm going to be telling you all the reasons why you should definitely read it and add it to your list. So my history with this book is quite random. I bought it when I was 13 and in Spain, because I used to go to Spain a lot with my family on holiday because we have an apartment there, and I used to bring probably about 8 books in my suitcase, which would obviously make the suitcase very heavy, so I had to be very precious about my books. And this one particular holiday I had run out of books to read, so we went to an English bookstore in Spain, which was ridiculously expensive because they're printing in English when obviously we're in Spain, and I saw this book, The Outsiders, and I think really it was the cover that intrigued me. It also said that it was a classic. It's a Puffin Modern classic, and honestly, yeah, it was the cover, and mainly because I thought the boys on the front were hot, and also the blurb really interested me. So I bought this when I was 13 in Spain with the intention of reading it, but then I didn't actually read it until I was 16. Actually just realised I made a mistake. I wasn't 13, I was 15. The book was £13. So this was £13, a paperback, not a very big book, and it was just £13 because it was English in Spain. I feel like the context in which you read a book is very important for if it's going to be the right book for you at that time. I definitely experienced this a lot, especially with films. But yeah, I think if you come across a book at the wrong time, then you're probably not going to like it. But for me, when I read this book, it was just the right time. So I was 16, I was revising for my GCSEs, I was having my GCSEs exams, because the way that it's done in the UK is you have your exams kind of like, I had like probably 3 or 4 a week. So let's say on Monday I had English, Sunday I'd be revising English, but I'd also be revising the history exam I had on Wednesday. So you're kind of revising loads of different things, and then as soon as you get one exam over, you can take that off the revising roster, and then you're still revising loads of other exams. So that for me kind of felt like you do an exam, 3-hour English exam where you had to write essays. You'd feel dead, but you'd have to revive yourself from the dead when you got home and revise for your next exam tomorrow, which I didn't like that structure, but it's over now, I've done it. And essentially I read this book during that time, and I would use it as my breaks. So I would do 45-minute stints of revision and then read for a chapter, or like 10 minutes, 15 minutes as a break. So I think I just really loved it in terms of escapism, because I was so stressed and didn't like the situation I was in. So reading this book was such a joy to me because it meant I wasn't revising. And yeah, it was just, I think it was the escapism of that time. I fully and completely escaped into this book and became obsessed with it. So I read this book extremely fast, and I remember being very sad when it was over. So my edition of the book is 217 pages, which is not very long. So I did end up reading it very fast, but I also remember kind of savouring it because I didn't want it to end because I was enjoying it that much. I remember I finished it on a Saturday morning in bed, and as soon as I finished it, I felt compelled to write a poem. I just felt so inspired by the book that I just read, and I just wrote a poem like off the cuff from that book, which I've never ever done before. I don't really write poetry that often, but yeah, I just was so inspired that I just sat down and wrote a poem on a Saturday morning because of this book. So as mentioned, after I read it, I became obsessed with the book and the story and the characters. I made a playlist of songs that reminded me of the book. I found out there was a film version, which I of course watched, bought, became obsessed with. I then forced my friends to read the book in a book club that we created. I made a quiz about it, and I dressed up as the Outsiders and forced all my friends to dress up as them in a calendar shoot that we made. So I think the month of January, or was it? No, the month of February, because that's when my birthday is, was Outsiders month, and we were all dressed up as the characters. I did a photo shoot as the characters, and I even wrote a whole fanfic based on this book, based on 1 year after the events of this book. And when I was in uni, I tried to put on a play of the book, because there is actually a play version that I wanted to edit and put on, but I have not done that yet, so I'm still working on that one. I'd still really love to do that. So as you can tell, I was obsessed and still am obsessed with this book. So I wanted to give a basic plot summary of the book, but without giving any spoilers, so don't worry about that. So first of all, I'll just read you the blurb of my version. The hand at the back of my neck was strong. I'm drowning, I thought. The Socia's idea of having a good time is beating up greasers like Ponyboy. Ponyboy knows what to expect and knows he can count on his brothers and friends, until the night someone takes things too far. And then it says under, a groundbreaking, timeless story from a brilliant writer. And I have to agree. So that's the blurb. I'll give you my own spoiler-free synopsis. So it's set in the 1960s, which is actually when the book was written, and we follow the life of a 14-year-old boy named Ponyboy who lives with his two older brothers, Darry and Soda Pop, and they are in this gang called the Greasers, and they have a rival gang called the Socias, which is short for socials. And the Greasers are essentially the poor kids and the socials are the rich kids. And then the book is essentially just about all the drama that ensues from this gang war that these two groups have. And in the introduction of my version, it says, unlike most stories about adolescence, this is not about the breakaway from restrictive parents. In fact, adults have been almost completely removed from the story. Far more interestingly, it is about how teenagers regard themselves and each other. Hinton's adolescent insight was remarkably assured, pinpointing motives as well as describing the actions of her young hoods. I know that for some people in America, they read it as part of their curriculum, so you'd study it like in school in English, but I think that's way less common for the UK. In the UK, we tend to do Of Mice and Men, Great Gatsby, Woman in Black, In Spectacles, those type of things. I think I've never heard of anyone studying The Outsiders in UK schools. So a little backstory about the book as well. It was written by S.E. Hinton, who is Susan Hinton, and it was written in 1967, and it's described as a coming-of-age novel. And Hinton herself wrote the book between the ages of 15 and 16, which is just insane to me, that you write a book that is considered an American classic so young. And then she was 18 when the book was finally published. Although I've seen some difference about this, because online it says that, but in the inscription of my book it says she was 17. So just she was that type of age. She was around that type of age, a late teen. And the book became an immediate success when it was published. And the book was even made into a film directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which I don't know if you've heard of him, but he did The Godfather, he did Apocalypse Now, and he is the father of Sofia Coppola, who you may have also heard of. Also, just a side note, I could do a whole separate video on the film. I probably will one day. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it. Yeah, just that there's a film. But I could have a lot to say about just the film itself. So the reason Susan's name is printed as S.E. Hinton is her and her publisher wanted to avoid any prejudice to her gender. So obviously S.E. Hinton could easily be a man and they wouldn't necessarily know it was a female. And she was scared that the book wouldn't be taken as seriously if it was known that it had been written by a woman, especially with the themes of the book being gangs and violence and the titular character being a boy who's not written by a man. And yeah, I think this was a very valid concern for her. I can imagine people not liking the fact that a woman wrote a boy, especially in the 60s. And in the inscription of my book, it says that Hinton was disturbed by the gang clashes that she witnessed at her school. And these clashes were gangs of the same name, so the Greasers and the Socias, in her school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is also where the book is set. Okay, so that's all the kind of background of the book out of the way. Now I want to talk about why did I love this book so much. And it's super short and extremely easy to read because it's very colloquial in the way it's written, and there's also a lot of dialogue. It's not so much description heavy. It's a lot of talking, so you're getting through the pages very fast, quite fast paced. Now, I'm someone who loves classics. I'm not afraid of a book that is long and rambly and hard to read and digest and all of that. But yeah, I think it was quite refreshing in just how easy it was to read. As I said, I read it very quickly and just absolutely sobbed my heart out while reading it. and just found it very inspiring as a writer. And I just love this book because it is extremely character driven. Even though there is a plot and there is a lot that happens, for me, I think what makes it so amazing and so lovable are the characters. So I just kind of wanted to go through the characters just a bit to kind of give you an idea of the characters that you will be encountering while reading this book. So you obviously have the main character, Pony Boy, who is a 14-year-old boy, and he's honestly one of my favourite literary characters that I've ever read. I find him so relatable, even though our lives couldn't be more different. Like, he is a male, he is in the 60s, he's in a gang, like, he's so different from me, but he's just so relatable. Pony Boy is kind of described as this boy who is a dreamer. He loves movies, he loves books, he loves writing, and he loves sunsets. And he's kind of someone who he's been misplaced. It's almost like he's been put in the wrong place, because he is a dreamer and he has this mind, and a mind that likes to write and be poetic, and that would like to go on and kind of study and do great things of his life. But he's been dealt this hand in life where, and this, it's not really a spoiler, you find out right at the beginning, but his parents have both died, so he's being looked after by his two brothers, and they are living in poverty, and that's kind of the hand that he's been dealt in life, and it doesn't really match up with his brain and how he feels. And he's also, for me, quite a gentle boy, which is very interesting to see this juxtaposition of this gentle boy who's been thrown into gang life, and how he is gentle at heart, but he is in a gang and he is experiencing gang life. So it's kind of, the tussle of that, I think. Next you have Pony's older brother, who is called Dari. Now, he is the eldest of his two older brothers. Dari did really well in school. He was a jock, he was popular. He was kind of the complete opposite of someone who is in the greaser gang that they are all in. But he essentially had to give all that up when his parents died, and he gave everything up to look after his two younger brothers. So Dari is very selfless. He's quite hard and he's quite cold. He's extremely physically fit and strong and muscly, and kind of gives off this cold aura. Kind of doesn't know how to express his feelings, but underneath that exterior he does really care, and that is very evident by the fact he's given up everything for his younger brothers. Just family is at the center of everything that Dari does. Next you have Pony's other older brother, who is Soda Pop. Now, Soda Pop is very good looking. It said this in the book, that Soda Pop is the best looking of all of them. He's very good looking, very popular with the girls, but he's not very smart, so he didn't do very good at school. He dropped out. He now works as a mechanic, and he's kind of, I suppose, kind of happy with his life as it is now, living with his brothers, working a mechanic, having this kind of like simple life. That's fine for him. Like that's he's content with that. He's very lovable. He's kind of the antithesis of Dari. Like he's not cold at all. He's lovable, he's affectionate, wears his heart on his sleeve, emotional, and as well as Dari, has family at the heart of everything, and just loves his brothers very much. Next up we have Johnny, one of my favourite characters. I feel like everyone would have Johnny as one of their favourite characters, but Johnny is a member of the gang who's kind of seen as like the baby of the gang, kind of like the gang's pet, like the puppy. His nicknames include Johnny Cake, because his name's Johnny Cade. And so the whole gang just kind of look after him, and there's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't give shit to Johnny, because it's Johnny. Like, he wouldn't hurt anyone. And Johnny he's 16 but he looks 14, so he's a really small boy. Johnny lives with his mum and dad, but they are terrible parents and they beat him up all the time. And I think especially his dad and his mum just kind of lets it happen, and it's kind of, he's also a victim of poverty and kind of prefers the found family he has with the gang over his actual family, because the gang treat him a lot better than his parents do. And Johnny, he's just a very nice character. He's a very nice person, gentle again, like Pony, very gentle, not violent, not actually a violent person, but maybe when pushed, violence might happen. But very gentle, very loyal, extremely loyal to his found family. Next up we have Steve, probably my least favourite character. Yeah, I just think he's probably the most two-dimensional, like the one you don't really find out that much about. Also, Pony doesn't really like Steve, and because Pony's the narrator, you kind of side with him. But Steve is Soda Pop's best friend, works as a mechanic with Soda Pop. Very similar to Soda Pop, not as attractive, but very similar, just like joking around, doesn't take life too seriously, definitely violent when he has to be, but also enjoys fighting, which so do Soda and Dari, which is where Johnny and Pony would differ, in that they don't enjoy fighting, it's more of just something that they have to do if they have to. But Dari, Soda and Steve and other members of the gang actively enjoy it and get excited when a fight is going to happen. So yes, that's all I can really say about Steve. Next up we have 2-Bit. He's a great character. 2-Bit is essentially the Joker of the gang. He's just a big old joker. He just doesn't take life very seriously. He lives with his mum, a single mum, and yeah, just like laughing, loving life. He really likes women, tries to pick women up, doesn't have much luck because they kind of laugh at him. But yeah, just a really nice character, gets on really well with Johnny and Pony Boy because he's just really nice and funny and just fun to hang out with. He also loves Mickey Mouse. That's something that they decide that needs to be known about 2-Bit, is that he loves Mickey Mouse. And finally we have Dally. Now Dally is probably one of the most complicated characters and kind of one of the ones you don't know how to feel about them, because he is in a gang, but he is a gang member through and through. He isn't from where they're from. He originally lived in New York and now he's come here, and he went to prison, and at the start of the book he's getting out of prison, and Dally is essentially he's a criminal. He is mean, he's tough, he's hard, he's scary, and he's kind of not very nice. Like, he likes to steal things from old women, he likes to terrorize children for fun, he's not very nice to women, he doesn't treat women very well. He's just not a very nice person, but the reason why it's kind of contradictory is because he is very nice to Johnny and Pony Boy and members of his gang. So Dally and Johnny have a very special relationship in that Johnny completely worships Dally, completely looks up to him, loves him so much, kind of wants to be like him, sees him as an idol, and Dally loves Johnny back and kind of sees him as kind of like a baby, like this being that he needs to protect, and yeah, just wants to take care of, wants to look after, wants to make sure that nothing happens to him, because Dally kind of knows how hard life can be. He's seen the worst in life and in people, and kind of wants to shield Johnny from that, which is something that he tries to do throughout the book. But if you read it, you can see that's a hard thing to do when you're in a gang, to shield someone from the troubles of life, I suppose, and from the poverty that they all come from. It's inevitable that they're going to suffer in some way or another. So yeah, that's a little overview of the characters, and honestly, yeah, for me, I think it's the characters that make the story so good, because you get attached to them, you feel like you're one of them, like you are part of the gang, and you follow them on this journey, on this plot. The plot is also, it's not boring, it's definitely not boring. I don't think it's the best plot ever, but I think it's not boring at all, and it's a very important story. I think main takeaway from this would be why I think other people should read this book is because I think, yeah, it's a very important story about poverty, about young boys in poverty, about boys trying to navigate who they are in a life where they're outsiders and people have labelled them as such, and maybe they don't want to be that, but people have decided that about them, and them kind of navigating that, coming of age in this extremely hostile environment. And it also touches on toxic masculinity, loss, family, found family, brotherhood, love between men and boys. And yeah, I think it is an extremely, extremely valuable and important story, and it's very sad, I will say. It is a sad book, it is a sad story. I cried many times, but I think ultimately you are left with this feeling of inspiration, sadness. I know for me it was anger that some people have to live like this. But yeah, ultimately I just think it's a very valuable story and book, and I would encourage anyone to pick it up and give it a read, because it's so quick and easy. You'd read it very fast, and I think you can gain so much from it. And I've said that it's very easy to read and it's quite colloquial, but that doesn't mean it's not without its beautiful passages and its beautiful moments, because it is. And in the book they kind of concentrate on the Robert Frost poem Nothing Gold Will Stay, which I won't go any further into it because I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, they kind of concentrate on that poem throughout it as well. And it is, even though it's simple and colloquial, it is also beautiful, and definitely a book that I think is deserving of the title classic. And that is my favourite book, and why I love it so much. The Outsiders by Essie Hinton. She has some other books as well. She's written some other stuff, and some of them have also been made into films, but I have not read anything else by her. I really should, because considering this is my favourite book of all time, I really should. That was my favourite book. I would really urge you to read it, see what you think, because I just think it is an extraordinary read, and I'm yet to find a book that has surpassed this as my favourite book. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you